Bonjour, Kinamagi Nene Erlen and Dishnikas, and welcome to this production of Social Studies Explorer. Today's episode, Declaring Independence. Today's content comes to us from the MESA program, as teachers will be familiar with. And we're going to talk about declaring independence. This will build on what we did yesterday, and we have a few more points of discussion here. We'll highlight the work that you were sent home and be able to partially complete some of it, and then be able to move forward from there. So some important people in declaring independence: Thomas Paine, and we heard about him yesterday with Common Sense. Ended up selling about 500,000 copies, and as the video portion in the previous lesson suggested, he was selling as many copies as the Bible, which is pretty impressive because, well, that's the number one selling book of all time. Richard Henry Lee was one of the founding fathers who suggested the Declaration of Independence, and Thomas Jefferson, who is given credit as the author, although part of a writing team. Some important events: they had appointed a committee. Like I just mentioned, Thomas Jefferson doesn't do this all by himself. He has to write a draft, just like you do with writing city. Then you revise it, and then they had to vote to accept that, or which is also known as adopting it. So in a lot of ways, some of these skills are the same things that you do every day in class. Some word cards: public opinion, the point of view held by most people, and the Declaration of Independence, the document in which the colonists officially declared their independence from Britain. Here's a quotation to begin with: "There is something absurd in supposing a continent to be perpetually governed by an island." This, by Thomas Paine, is meant to suggest that little old England had no business telling us what to do on the other side of the ocean. There was far more land, and although Britain was obviously militarily superior at this moment in time, and probably dwarfed most previous empires in the history of the world with land that they had stolen, it is suggesting that you guys stay over there, we'll stay over here. So we have some documents from Common Sense. If you want to try to fill this out on your own and then see the answers, you should pause the video and give me your opinions on the first 5 right here. This is not in the Google form. It would be using the document that you were handed, and then unpause the video to check it out. Even if you don't write it down, I would like you to pause the video and contemplate these parts and see what we have. So go ahead and pause the video now. Welcome back. Let's see our answers. So a government of our own is our natural right. We have the right to have our own government in the same way we have the right to life and liberty. That's that anti-colonial idea of you guys can't tell us what to do. Funny how that works. Group 2. Everything that is right or reasonable pleads for separation. The blood of the slain, the weeping voice of nature cries, it's time to part. The text provides this explanation: it is reasonable and right for us to separate from Britain. The killings and crying voices all give us the same message. It's time to go our own way. This is that moment where there are so many connections that can be made to other parts of world history that would fill an entire class. But we'll keep somewhat on track. Group 3. Even the distance at which the Almighty hath placed England and America is a strong and natural proof that the authority of the one over the other was never the design of heaven, to be always running 3,000 or 4,000 miles with a tale or a petition will in a few years be looked upon as folly and childishness. Basically, America and England are so far apart that there's no reason that England should control us. Keep in mind, this is before the era of FaceTime, so it literally could take months to get information back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean. We hadn't even yet invented the telephone. Yeah, I know. There was a time before you had those attached to your hand. And there is a time before even telegraph. Group 4, small islands not capable of protecting themselves are the proper objects for government to take under their care. But there's something absurd in supposing a continent to be perpetually governed by an island. And you saw that quote above. And it means, why should an island rule over a continent? Only small islands that cannot protect themselves should be ruled by another government, not an entire continent. There's definitely some arguments on the anti-colonial tip to be made there, but that's what he's trying to say. And group 5, until an independence is declared, the continent will feel itself like a man who continues putting off some unpleasant business from day to day, yet knows it must be done, hates to set about it, wishes it over, and is continually haunted with the thoughts of its necessity. Long story short, that means independence will have to eventually be declared, so there's no sense in putting it off. This is like a person who keeps putting off something they know they have to do, such as folding laundry, for one instance. We're going to skip the section on a textbook. You can see Thomas Jefferson's writing desk, not a very large piece. I'm going to imagine that folded out to give a little extra space. You can see what the document actually looked like. You can see that there's some editing. Yes, what you do in Writing City is the same thing that other authors such as Jefferson do. Another rough draft. Here's a timeline of the independence. In June of 1776, Richard Henry Lee suggested a resolution for independence. 4 days later, a committee was appointed to draft that statement. And for the next 3 weeks, the Declaration of Independence was drafted, mainly by Thomas Jefferson, but also by the committee, although Jefferson is the one given credit. Moral of the story, it took us, almost the better part of a month to write our breakup letter. By the 2nd of July, the Lee resolution was adopted and Congress began to consider the draft. 2 days later, it was adopted and printed. No, we did not have the day off of work. It was not a federal holiday. We did not yet actually have control of our own country. But that is the date that we now celebrate our independence on, with cool fireworks. On the 5th of July, copies of the Declaration were sent from members of Congress to colonial assemblies, committees, and commanders of the Continental troops, including George Washington. 3 days later, we began reading it out in public to Philadelphia, which also was followed by fireworks. Good idea on that tradition, y'all. Keep in mind, this was that first chance for people to start hearing about it. It's not like, your favorite local media network brought in and said, breaking news, live from Philadelphia. Here is Joe Smith or Jane Smith with today's news. Well, we're just reporting live that the Declaration has been signed. Here's what it says. It'll take me 9 minutes and some odd seconds for a bunch of celebrities to read it. No, you went out, it might be in a newspaper, or you went outside and you read it in the town square. And then everyone told everyone in the world's largest game of telephone, which they wouldn't have known what that is, but maybe a lot of strings and cups involved. The next day, Washington had the Declaration read to his assembled troops. And later that night, Continental soldiers destroyed a bronze statue of King George. Maybe that was their form of celebrating. Woohoo! Let's break stuff. Like the chains holding us to Britain. July 19th, 10 days later, Congress ordered the Declaration to be engrossed or clearly printed and signed. And then on August 2nd, it was signed by most of the members of Congress, including in very large print by John Hancock. You can use all of this information to what's going to be your assignment today. And this is going to be in the Google Classroom. You're going to plan a newspaper article. You're not going to actually have to formally write it fancy, but you're going to come up with a headline. So you're going to be insert name here of the local news, maybe, WSCA Channel 5, just saying. You're going to tell us what happened, who was involved, when, where, and why. I don't know where you would find any dates. Just saying, names, maybe a little bit of why. If you're stuck on planning on this, ask a classmate. Even though you're going to each submit your own, These kind of discussions help make meaning, and that's the important part of this lesson. At this point, we're going to send you off to your writing tables, aka Chromebook, and we're going to create the plan for that newspaper article to tell the world what just happened in Philadelphia. I'll be looking forward to that breaking news and cutting into the middle of whatever sporting event I'm trying to watch on TV, but I'll be glad it's you with the report. Have a Minogijigad, Minwa, Bamapi.